On today's show, the Caps are stuck playing just okay hockey. No consistency, no margin for error, and no more time to wait for it to click. This road trip is the line in the sand. Either the Caps find another gear or the season starts slipping away.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in a playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the struggling Capitals and how they need a jolt, both emotionally and structurally. I'll talk about that a bit later. We'll talk about the front office knows this is not enough. And I guess big picture, the question is for Chris Patrick, are you going to do something about it? But just to get it going here, it is a game day as the Capitals play. They play the Avalanche this afternoon. Yeah, I had to think about it there. Kind of matinee action, I guess you could say, 4 p.m. Eastern time, and a lot at stake, right? And a good measuring stick, a good litmus test for this team, and to see how they're going to perform against a team last checked has the most points in all of the NHL. Now, it's all about wins and losses and these kind of things. That's all that really matters in points, right? But I think if the Capitals could win this afternoon against a really great hockey team, that could be the boost of the confidence that this team needs as they head out on a long West Coast trip. And a good opportunity to kind of try to climb back that Metropolitan Division ladder. It's not going to be easy. There are no big upgrades as I record this. It's always possible that Wilson joins the mix, but as of right now, as I record this at 11:32 Eastern, no word on it yet. So the Capitals playing just okay is what's killing this team. And many people point to that when I'm critical of this team, like, well, this player did play. It's big picture. 30,000-foot view, this team is not playing good enough to be competitive. And the Capitals' biggest problem isn't talent. It isn't injuries, and it isn't even the schedule. It's that they're just playing okay hockey. And in the National Hockey League, that gets you absolutely nowhere. And you see the big targets and the teams that always do things well. I'm talking about the Vegas Golden Knights, and I guess we can cross, as a matter of fact, I know we can cross Rasmus Andersson's name off the list as he is headed out to Sin City. And just a team, that does the things that make them in the hunt each and every year. We talk about prospects, and we don't want to deplete this and that. Vegas finds a way to be in the hunt each and every year. The Capitals could take a page out of the Vegas Golden Knights book as a team that knows how to do things well. Of course, we know the Capitals beat the Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup, right? But since then, they have been in the hunt each and every year. Because why? They're not afraid of making changes. They're not afraid of shaking up the snow globe. And when you take a look out west there, it's, there's teams that are running away with it. Teams that weren't as good last year are good this year. See San Jose, for example. So the Vegas Golden Knights, they understood they needed to do something. I think the Capitals need to do that. And playing this milquetoast, blase, just okay hockey is not cutting it. And, it's not just me. It's not, just a podcaster, Dan, talking about the Capitals. The players on the team know it as much. Nick Dowd saying it out loud on the record, quote, "I just feel like we're doing everything just okay at times and haven't been able to collectively pull everything together," unquote. And touche, right? Those are the things that you need to do. And when players start using the phrase just okay, that is, hockey speak for that's a red flag, and Spencer Carbery, that's got to be a red flag for him as well. Because this team flashes dominance for, let's say, 10 minutes, right? And then disappears for the next 20, then chases the game late. Wash, rinse, repeat. At the end of the shower, it ends in a loss. And this is why the Caps have not done something that is of paramount importance if you want to do great things. They have not won back-to-back games since December 3rd. We're past the midway point of January. That has been a long time. And let that just sit for a second and marinate. They have not won back-to-back games since December 3rd. Are we still pushing the panic button? I mean, that's what I'm talking about here. 4-5-1 in the last 10, fourth in the Metro, 1 point out of third, 3 out of second. And, the wild card race, tighter than Capital One Arena security, if you know what I mean. So on paper, they're fine because there is no one save Carolina that's really kind of running away with it, right? That I think that it's advantageous, that not that they had a choice, but that they are in the Metro Division, as there are teams that are not really elevating themselves other than, like I said, Carolina. Because on the ice, they're inconsistent to the point of being unreliable. And, as you go into this game tonight, I think you could draw the conclusion that the Capitals could walk away from this game with a loss just based on that. But like I said, if they could dig deep, and we have seen this team do it historically, dig as deep as they possibly can, this could be the moral boost that this team is looking for. And here's where I'm going to kind of just state my case here. Good teams don't need to be in perfect health to be consistent. Great teams find a way. And, I've talked about on the show, because that is the common thread. The Capitals would be good if it was for Wilson, sort of, Pierre-Luc Dubois, right? And I understand that has an impact, that, yes, injuries matter. Yes, Tom Wilson being out matters. Pierre-Luc Dubois being out matters. But every team deals with this. The Capitals' issue is urgency. And John Carlson, number 74, who's up for a new contract, he said, quote, "It doesn't matter how we feel or how sorry we feel for ourselves. We're right in the thick of things," unquote. That's true, right? You have to not think too far down. You can't think about April. To quote Davey Martinez, you have to go 1-0 every day. That hasn't happened for the Capitals in a while. But what is that? That's the veteran leadership speaking. But leadership without execution is just noise in the background. Because like I said, this road trip is going to test them right out of the gate. They're playing the Avalanche. Then they have the Oilers. They have the Flames. They have the Canucks, the Kraken. And it's gonna be tough, right? I think that some of the games are more easy to win than others. Of course, I would circle the Flames and I would circle the Canucks. And then the Kraken for me is kind of a toss-up. But this game is this road trip is going to determine where the Capitals are at. And for Chris Patrick, if you're listening or watching this, this needs to be the time that you make the decision that many people feel you should have made before. If the Capitals tank this road trip, there is absolutely zero doubt in my mind that the Capitals need to shake it up. They need to make some big trades to try to do something like the Golden Knights are doing, stay in the hunt. As of right now, the Capitals are struggling with consistency, and they're struggling with injuries. This team sorely needs a boost. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about just that. The Capitals need a jolt, both emotionally and structurally. Straight ahead. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets that you like the most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boost you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. And that's the thing I love about FanDuel, that our regional teams are no longer in it, but you can still have vested interest in some postseason football. Make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not done so already, go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. One more time, lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. You'll get access to an ad-free version of this show compatible with Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts, and invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes one for Locked On Capital, so we can talk Caps hockey one-on-one. There is so much to love, so go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. There's also a link in the show notes. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So the Caps need a jolt, right? They need something to go right. As you've seen games here where they've actually had the lead and blow it. I think about the Panthers game, for example, as just one of those moments like, oh my God, is this how bad we are right now? And I think they need that jolt both emotionally as well. This team doesn't need a speech, right? I mean, it would help, maybe a TJ Oshie of old, bring him in here, as a matter of fact, and have it a players only except for TJ Oshie, and just really rally the troops. They need a jolt. And that jolt has to come from both urgency and the lineup. And Carlson and Chychrun, they didn't sugarcoat it. They said, quote, we need to find that momentum as a group, work harder, get to the pucks more. More desperation and urgency, unquote. And, those are kind of Captain Obvious answers. And, to Chychrun and his credit, he did the things, right? Coming fresh off that new dad energy, scoring 2 goals. But it needs to be just more than Chychrun. It needs to be kind of the tertiary players and maybe the players that shouldn't even be in the lineup, elevating the team, right? That it is talking about Hendrik Lapierre. It's talking about Sonny Milano, Duhaime to a certain extent. Why are these guys here, right? I sometimes ask myself that question, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're dealing with quite a few injuries. But, you look at it, desperation, urgency, those aren't, playoff buzzwords. Those are survival words. And, often at this point of the season, when I've covered the Capitals in the past, it's like, wow, who do you think this team's going to be playing in the playoffs? And can they just keep being in first place for the rest of the season? Desperation and urgency have crept in this season kind of inexplicably. Like I've talked about, key subtractions, Mangiapane, Radish, Eller, Alexiev. Are those subtractions, are they what put the Capitals in this position? I find that hard to believe, because what I've noticed with this team is too many slow starts, too many passengers, like I alluded to, and too many games where only one line shows up. And now, look, Chychrun scoring twice and being the only consistent offensive threat some nights, that's not a recipe for success. That's a warning sign. That is Alex Ovechkin of old having to carry the team on his back, that it's never advantageous for a team, to have one guy stirring the drink. And, you take a look at Brett Leeson going back down to Hershey. That tells you that Tom Wilson very well could be in the lineup tonight? I'm going to go ahead and say probably will be, just based on that news there. And yes, that matters a lot. Tom Wilson, right, leads the team, 22 goals, 42 points. And that's despite missing a lot of time. He changes the game in a lot of ways. I said that it can't be just Chychrun, but if you add a guy like Wilson, you got to know that if he's in the game, he is going to be a bull in the china shop. He's going to be physical. He's going to be goal scoring, and the Avalanche players are not going to get away with anything, because that's what he does. He changes the games emotionally, and he drags his teammates into the fight. That's what we need. We need number 43 now more than we've ever needed him before. Because if this team needs just one fix to fix the effort, there's a deeper issue. Carb said it as well. He said, quote, sometimes a long road trip can spark something, a little bit of continuity, unquote. And, you don't have all the things going on at home, that it is you on the road with your teammates. There's a lot of weight that's put into that. We heard this story earlier before in the season that, these team bonding road trips. And I think there's some truth to that. But however you got to get there, I don't care how you get there, just get there, start winning games. So Carb's saying that. Translation, we're hoping the reset works. Hope is the operative word. And, how difficult it must be for Spencer Carbery at this point, that I think that it's difficult for him, because, again, I don't think he forgot how to coach. Jack Adams winner last season. I don't think he lost his way. I just think that he doesn't have the tools or the right tools, not the right additions. You know what I mean? It's like you're using a phone with a couple of versions old without the update, that you get the update. You're like, yeah, now it's working again. The Capitals need the latest version uploaded to their system, so we can all be like, yeah, that's how we win hockey games. Because right now it feels like the Capitals are a couple updates old on their iPhone or Android device. We need them running at peak performance. And, sometimes it does that, right? The hotels, team dinners, no distractions. But at some point, hope turns into accountability. I don't want this to be the script for a Disney hockey movie, if you will. I want this to be a script of success for the Capitals. Again, I don't care how you get there. And some tough love, some tough decisions need to come from Spencer Carbery, need to come from Chris Patrick. And what is your plan, right? What is your plan to turn this ship around? We still want to win this season, right? I hear a lot of fans on Twitter, on YouTube saying it's not about this season, Dan. They're good this season. It's all about the future. And I get that. But are we resigned to the fact that the 25-26 season is already a wash? And to the people that say they'll turn it around, I need some evidence. I need some proof of concept before I put my eggs in that basket. All right, so coming up here after the break, the front office knows this isn't enough. The bigger question is, what do they plan to do to address it? Straight ahead. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want the right candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps you listings stand out and reach the quality candidates faster. Sponsored job boosts your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. Listen, I'm involved in the hiring and the firing and people turning in paper applications. It can be a real headache, but we started using Indeed, and let me tell you, it's been a game changer for me. I know it'll be a game changer for you as well. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/locked-on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on the Locked On Capitals podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. And are you on TikTok? You can find us there. It's at Locked On Capitals. All right, in the final segment here, deadline pressure builds. As some of the bigger names are coming off the board, I know that Elliot Friedman and Dave Pagnotta talked about Rasmus Andersson, right? And would he be a good fit with Washington? They thought he might be. Well, as it turns out, he is headed out to Vegas to help bolster that team. So that would have been a premier defender, especially if they cannot come to terms with John Carlson, as was said, as both Patrick and Carlson's representation have been talking. So hopefully that's encouraging that, he can sign a couple-year deal, maybe let's say a 2 to 3 year deal. That's what I think would be the sweet spot for him. But let's dive into segment 3 here, is that Chris Patrick knows this roster isn't finished. And the trade deadline tells us everything we need to know. And it's not that far away. And honestly, we hear about that artificial line in the sand that is the Olympic break about when teams are going to decide if they're in it or out of it. I think the Capitals would be best to make a move before the trade deadline. He said, quote here, Chris Patrick, that is, we view our biggest need as a kind of high-end skilled winger. Those comments via Tom Galiti of NHL.com. And that's GM speak for we don't have enough game breakers. And this is no surprise. Spencer Carbery said it on the Junkies show, I don't know, a month or so ago, about saying that there's not enough finishers on this team. And that's quite a shot across the bow for a guy like Alex Ovechkin, and other players on this team. You think that would be a fire under their butts to say, I better step up. No finishers. Well, I'll show you. That's what we need, because last season, we take a look back, 111 points, first in the East, 3.49 goals per game. Now, this season, in contrast, 12th in scoring, inconsistent, injury-riddled, chasing games instead of controlling them. And Patrick's trying to thread a tough needle here. Help Ovechkin now, protect the future, avoid selling the farm. It is a tightrope for this team to walk, and for Chris Patrick to walk, rather, about you want to win this year, but we don't want to give up the likes of a Hudson, a Leonard, a Miroshnichenko, a Crystal. You know the guys I'm talking about. And that's ultimately what the other teams are looking for. And yes, Alex Ovechkin's clock matters. This could be his final season. That's always been my belief. It's his last year under contract anyway, and Patrick admitted it without saying it. He said, quote, he's very focused on this team trying to get into the playoffs and have another shot, unquote. And, this is something we knew. This is something I talked about if you're an everydayer, part of the Everydayer Club, last summer, when the Capitals were all in on Nikolai Ehlers, and we think about, what he has meant for Carolina. That could have been a huge boost for this team. And that's the window. That's the pressure. And then you add into all of that the John Carlson extension talks that in the offseason, it was like breakdown day. They asked about John Carlson about, what is your plans? You're entering into your final season. And he was non-committal. Chris Patrick and the Capitals were non-committal. And that's where we're at. John Carlson extension talks, and that's another signal. This isn't a teardown. This is a retool on the fly. Because you take a look, this is according to AFP Analytics. Carlson extension projects at 3 years, $6.9 million AAV. Caps projected cap space next year, $35.6 million. Now, they're positioning themselves, but positioning only matters if you're relevant in March. And right now, again, I'm just a straight shooter here. I'm calling it as I see it. I have seen nothing that makes me feel like this team has pushed their chips in on winning. Sort of. And Chisholm were the only big deals since last summer, and the big deals coming up to current date. We've seen some additions down in Hershey to fill the holes on the roster, and some of those have paid off. Belpedio, these kind of guys. But no upper echelon. So here's the blunt Capitals truth here. Just okay hockey doesn't survive the Metro. It doesn't survive the West, and it sure as hell doesn't survive the playoffs. So, the Capitals wanting to do good things in the Metro, the Eastern, moving on to the playoffs and playing the best of the West. It doesn't matter if the Capitals cannot turn it around. And this road trip decides the direction. Can they find consistency? You're buyers. Stay just okay. You're treading water. You fall flat. The deadline gets uncomfortable fast because the problem, and I've talked about that ad nauseum on the show, is that there's not a tremendous amount of separation right now. But things are going to change between now and March when the trade deadline is. That if the Capitals are too far out of it, it's not going to matter. Go ahead and make a big move. You're too far out of it. It's going to be one of those things where, you're trying to make up too much ground and you're not going to have enough time to get it done. The Capitals should have made a move. I'm going to even go back further. Last trade deadline, when the only acquisition, the only trade was for Beauvillier. And because we don't want to mess up the locker room vibes, man. It's one of the best locker rooms in the NHL, blah, blah, blah. They should have made moves then. They assuredly should have made some moves last summer. And then they bring in Sortif, which, hey, I'm giving him his flowers. Really great, right? Sortif has been an absolute game changer. Declan Chisholm has played, all things considered, well when he's playing. He is who he is. He is the extra defender. But they didn't do enough. You see the Rasmus Andersson, swing, connect, home run, right? You see the Quinn Hughes thing for the Minnesota Wild, swing, connect, home run. And Chris Patrick up at the plate, here's the pitch, swing and a miss, rung him up. That's where we're at. Not even a swing, not even a swinging strike three, just strike three looking. That's what I feel like. And it's a fastball right down the center of the plate. And he was thinking on a changeup, right? That's where the Capitals are at right now. We're swinging and missing. But the thing of it is it's not too late. He could do something right now, right here, right now. And that's the distressing part. I do not want to put the 25-26 season in the recycle bin. What could be Alex Ovechkin's final ride in the NHL, because we're too worried to make a change. The ghosts of Philip Forsberg haunt the Capitals, right? You don't want to make that kind of move, or boo, I'm going to scare you. And, I don't want to trade Hudson or any of these guys, but there are players that could be traded. Like I've said, that, there's a glut of talent. There's goaltenders that, LaPierre, former first round pick, Duhaime is some muscle. Just on the fly here, I could put together some trades for you. And I know that that's not necessarily what the teams are looking for. That's not why it's going to be a player for player. A bundle and a draft pick, if it gets you an upper echelon, if it's enough juice to put the Capitals in the right direction, that could be huge. But again, like I've said, it's not just players, it's systems. The Capitals need to execute the plays that are laid out in front of them. A lot of questions for Chris Patrick, a lot of questions for Spencer Carbery. I stand pat. We need 3 additions, 2 forwards, a defender, and not blasé additions, players that will actually help this team win games. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You, as a matter of fact, are what makes this show successful. And are you one of those that listen on the audio side, the video side? First of all, thank you very much. I have something just for you. Extras, if you will. The Everydayer Club. For all of you that never miss an episode, go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. That's lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. You get an ad-free version of the show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Access to the Discord for Locked On, and more specifically, Locked On Capitals. Again, lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. There is also a link in the show notes. For those of you on the video side, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel on audio. Make sure your second listen is NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI, and I'll talk to you again next time.